Hey,
Hello, aloha.
hello, aloha.
All
Good to see
right.
you.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm supposed to get started. Hey. All right. Okay. Aloha, everybody. You're currently tuned into Unscripted, and this is a conversation about who gets to imagine the future. Just a few sort of notes here. This is part of a week-long series sponsored by the Robert Wynne Johnson Foundation, and today is day number 1. I'm Keolu Fox, and our guest today is Dr. and Professor Lonny J Avi Brooks. Dr. Brooks earned his PhD in communication from the University of California, San Diego, go Tritons, and his MA in library and information science from the University of California, Los Angeles, blue and gold. He's currently a professor at Cal State East Bay in Oakland, California, where his work explores some very interesting things that are central to our conversation today, and that is long-term and futurisms and futures thinking. And this futurism work goes in so many different directions. It centers the future of work, online gambling, diversity, equity, inclusion, multiracial identities, LGBTQ plus social media issues, sustainability, and much, much more. I'd also like to say that we are live on LinkedIn and we are live on YouTube, and this conversation is being recorded. And today's conversation is about futuring, forecasting, and how we anticipate and imagine and create our tomorrows, and why it's vital that more people, not just kind of a handful of powerful people, have the time and resources to envision the futures that they want to see and participate in. And that is going to be our conversation today with Dr. Brooks, but it's also going to be our conversation throughout the week. So, huge thank you to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for creating this platform. And these are the types of conversations that they're encouraging. And I think that's a really beautiful thing, sort of more than ever. The chat is open, so feel free to be kind to one another, treat each other with respect, and say hello to one another. Do us a favor and let us know where you're from and what land you're on. I'm originally from Hawaii, but I'm on land here in Pasadena, California. And just a quick note, Robert Wood Johnson encourages robust, nonpartisan dialogue because they're a private foundation. Federal laws restrict their activities, so please avoid discussing things like election campaigns, candidates, political party platforms, or specific litigation in the chat. Doesn't mean that it's not important and relevant. This is just not the sort of place for that dialogue. And then here's something fun. We're making stickers together, and I'm a firm believer that stickers are the easiest form of graffiti. And so when you hear something that feels sticker worthy, drop it into the chat and we will kind of think about and create our favorite quotes from these stickers from today's discussion. And you can order those free while supplies last. All right, so let's sort of begin. And Dr. Brooks, I'd love to begin with a question. And then you can respond, and then we can just kind of take it from there. But just tell us a bit about yourself and how you've come to futuring and how you've become, I think, a word I saw in an interview that you used that I thought was beautiful is kind of like a sage in this place. And I just want to know how you, as a person who contains multitudes, has arrived there.
Well, I might go in reverse chronological order. I'm the co-founder of the AfroRithm Futures Group with Ahmed Best, and our aim as a company is to democratize the future. And a story about how I met Ahmed is that his brother-in-law was said that Ahmed was interested in Afrofuturism. And this is back in 2017. And I said, "Oh, that's great. I'd love to talk to him." He said, "And by the way, he played Jar Jar Binks in Star Wars." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So we we got together and just had a 3-hour conversation on FaceTime. And by the end of that conversation, we created the Afrofuturist podcast, and where Ahmed hosts. But to go even further back in time, too, I did my dissertation on the Institute for the Future.
Mm.
You know, I grew up with Star Trek posters on my wall. I grew up with a disability. I was visually disabled, like I couldn't see that well, severely nearsighted. And so for me, like Geordi with the visor and the Next
Oh,
Generation of
yeah.
Star Trek was
Yeah.
like my hero, you know. And so for me, futures was really personal. I also have type 1 diabetes, so like I have an insulin pump that's like the size of, it's like little, you know, like these days the technology is so fantastic. So I was always tuned into science and the future and how we might anticipate healing. And so working with the Institute for the Future was like, I was like, wow, there's this think tank that gets to imagine the future, to think of scenarios of the future. And I was just so fascinated by them that I had to study them. And they were like my early mentor in like traditional futures thinking, or foresight, and its whole lineage. It's so fascinating. So I was just like, I grew up enamored by them. They were my teacher, my mentors. And also shout out to like Stuart Candy, Jane McGonigal, Rob Johansson, uh, Kathleen Savant, Kathy Vion. All those folks helped to nurture um, that interest in futures thinking and make it fun. I think that's the thing
Yeah.
too. Something that I learned from Eric Dishman at another place called Interval Research Futures Interval Research was, how do we perform the future
Yes.
and make it fun and enjoyable and immersive for people? So that's like how I came to futures thinking. It's just like, I found myself on a stage in the late 90s performing a scenario from the future in San Jose at a hotel, about the future of media. And it was really, really enjoyable. So I can go more into that, but that's, how I came to futures thinking. And also, okay, one more thing.
Please.
Just seeing that, when I arrived at the Institute for the Future, and other places, and it's not just the Institute for the Future, it's like ubiquitous in society, really. It's just that I didn't see a lot of myself reflected in the future, especially growing up in the 70s, right? Like I saw Lieutenant Uhura, in Star Trek as the Black communication officer, but I didn't see really a lot of my folks, Black, Native American, Jewish, even in the future, So for me, it was like something that I wanted to see if I could create alternative futures based on peoples that surround me and that are around me and in our culture. I'm in Oakland.
Yes.
I'm based in Oakland. That's the hub of such a multi variety of people. But yeah, so.
Like, let me follow up and ask you something about Oakland, because I think and I'm wearing my Warrior shirt today to honor you guys, and also Warriors are. I mean, it's such a beautiful concept. I mean, everybody loves Steph Curry and everything, but it's also the official mascot for Kamehameha schools. So, of course, as a Hawaiian person, double entendre here. But Oakland happens to be this kind of wildly futuristic place. So is California. Whether people like it or not, it is just a profoundly futuristic place in terms of art and science and culture and activism and all of these other things. So many resources, so much conflict, so much growth. And Oakland is especially unique in that whole area, the Bay Area, with scientific thought, art, the disability rights movement, obviously the Black Panthers, the conflict with Silicon Valley and surveillance and big data and all of these things. And I'm just wondering, as you're somebody who spends a lot of time there, hangs your hat there. And we should also mention just all the beautiful things that are going on with Sogorea Land Trust and the land back movement, and like, how does this happen with this confluence of power? Like, what to you kind of like, how do you see it as this like vertical for shaping and thinking about the future?
That's really a great question, because thinking of how the Black Panther films come out of Ryan Coogler's vision, and who's a native
From
uh,
Oakland.
from Oakland. You're right, and I really feel like it's the nexus of the intersection of what you said, the idea of envisioning um, something to fill the gaps that may have been erased over time.
Mm.
To my dad's from Kansas City,
Mm.
and he was a screenwriter, and he was trying to tell stories that hadn't been told before. You know, created a foundation for struggling Black artists. And so I think Oakland represents this real nexus of where we can see what's emerging technologically, and we can
Yes.
actually provide some insight on that. We can leverage what I call ancestral intelligence, the real AI,
Mm.
to
The
give
real
some
AI.
insight into how our ancestral lineages may approach that in a way that makes that technology bend towards flourishing humanity, not just something that takes from people and takes from people. And so that's where I feel like Oakland is such a hotbed, a great critical lens to
Mm.
say, hey, this technology is really powerful. It's wonderful magic and really interesting. But how do we help it help us? You know?
Yes. Yes.
Um,
I mean, you have talked about changing the aperture of the lens, and I feel like somewhere like Oakland, it just has a different aperture of the lens when we view the future. I kind of I think that that's such a blessing. It's like the gaze of looking across the East Bay and seeing what types of decisions other people are making, or I just think it's like a profoundly unique place to kind of compile and recombine all of these ideas. And places everything. I mean, that's the definition of indigeneity for so many people. And I kind of wanted to ask you about this too. It's like an important point of tension and conflict and growth. But a lot of the inspiration for indigenous futurism, which is, I don't know, uh, in so many ways borrows ideas and concepts from Afrofuturism. And I guess my question is do we have to define them as separate things? Are they the same thing? Is there a point where there's conflict and tension, where there's a like where's the boundary and where are the synergies, or is that just all manufactured? And this is for all my kind of huge nerds that are listening right now.
I love that question because, like, when you talked about Oakland, I always talk about this. I always mention W.B. Du Bois.
Yes.
And I work with this group called the Black Speculative Arts Movement. It's a global movement celebrating the Black imagination. Cherie Renee Thomas and others have found in W.B. Du Bois' archive, he was a sociologist at Harvard and a science fiction writer they discovered in the early 1900s, created
Yes.
this anthology. He created imagined this fantastic instrument called the megascope to look for
Mm,
the undiscovered stories. And
beautiful.
in fact, that's an imprint for John Jennings' comic imprint. It's called the Megascope. So
Yeah, yeah.
for the Megascope, it's like, how do you unearth the undiscovered stories of Oakland and other regions? And I think where you say Afrofuturism, which is about imagining alternative futures based on the Black experience, steeped in science fiction and fantasy, and Indigenous futurism is the same uh, growth out of that. I mean, I love Walking on a Cloud, that
Yes.
anthology of Native science fiction, you know, because it's really looking at those undiscovered stories of Indigenous peoples, taking science fiction and fantasy, weaving Indigenous stories into that. And for me, I mean, I have a student I work with. And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name. Forgive me, but she's a computer scientist at Stanford. I'll bring it
Mm,
up tomorrow. She has indigenous ancestry from Venezuela, and she was like
mm,
saying the stories from her father was about the stories of how Native peoples come from the sky and how they adapted to Earth. And I just thought that was so beautiful, because it's that's, I mean, that in itself sounds like a science fiction story, right?
Totally.
It's not.
Totally.
and so, I think Afrofuturism and Indigenous futurism are really, if you have a Venn diagram, they're within the ancestral intelligence megascope, right?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think that one hand washes. What do they say? One hand washes the other, and they both wash the face. And any way we can find clarity and help people forecast the future for alternatives is essential. And I tend to read both things as much as I can and try to blend science and art. It seems like you're really good at
Yeah.
that, right? You're taking advantage of both of those spaces and places. A lot of times I notice just from the scientific community, there seems to be this like artificial boundary that's created between science and art. And I was wondering if you could, speak to that in your own work. Like, what is it that allows you to blend and blur those things intentionally when other people probably they see the boundary and then they, about face, go the other direction?
Yeah, I think, well, my family, on both my mom and dad's sides are artists. I've been artist, and so that's really influenced me. And I was always a nerd. I was into science too, and but even with science fiction, I pay close attention to the aesthetics.
Mm,
What kind of future do I want to live in? You know, it's not necessarily a Blade Runner future, right?
yeah, yeah.
I kind of, when I talk with Ahmed, we're always talking about like, how do we get to the Star Trek universe?
Yes.
But I think art is so important because art is what's going to make you inspired, um, ground you in the future, reflect your dreams back to you in a way like even in Oakland, we have these wonderful Afrofuturist artists. Um, his last name is Mays. He does these murals
Mm,
downtown in Oakland. They're up on the buildings, and they show some Afrofuturists like imaginings. And I just feel like, oh my God, it's here! Like the spaceship has landed.
yes.
So it's I think the creativity to weave, and I'm going to ask you about this too, because I
Yeah.
feel like what you're doing is through DNA and genomics of Hawaiian heritage is telling a story,
Yes.
you know, and that like from that you create such an important narrative of what happened in the past and what can be amplified into the future.
Totally. I think like there's this thing that happens too when we talk about like empiricism and publishing our work in premier journals. And I think what people don't see is there's this intense narrativization in every component of the paper that you're writing, from the way you create the abstract to the way the font choices and color choices that you use to represent data, to visualize data, is art. And so we're blending these concepts and ideas in ways that I think are particular. I mean, we're trying to push the boundary on this near futurism and the way we examine the past with these new tools. In fact, we have a new paper coming out, and this is the culmination of like decades of work, and
Oh wow.
we're examining the genomes of thousands of people using a high-end version of genome sequencing, like the Ferrari version. And we're able to look at this in Oceania for the first time, the world's
Wow.
oldest, most ancient, largest ocean, the closest one to Oakland. And it's interesting because what we're seeing in Tahiti and the Marquesas and Rapa Nui and Hawaii, we're actually able to break down our voyaging history to the number of generations. So if we're from
Wow.
Hawaii, where did we come from before that? And before that, where did we come from? And so on. And we can break it down like a bunch of Russian, those Russian dolls where they're like a little doll inside of another. So we can
Yes.
create these
Yes.
kind of mathematical models where we can be like, oh wow, like in 34 generations ago, we were in Tahiti. We
Wow.
arrived in Tahiti, and we can make consensus with like ancient chants from thousands of years ago, and we can kind of confirm those things. We can also see the dent and the impact of colonialism, and how that shaped our immune systems in certain gene regions. And I think that's really important because it solidifies our identity in saying, like, colonialism isn't something we just brush off lightly. It's actually something that has shaped our susceptibility to disease, things like gout, metabolic disease. And then it gives us the empirical information we need to bargain to create better drugs and treatments for our people. And so I think nothing is more cool for me as a Hawaiian person than being like, literally, our voyaging history has shaped our genomes. And we can detect these things and the nuances and the directionality and the very established thing that we're so proud of, which is our voyaging history. And now we're able to sort of blend these things in this new way. For me, that's definitely Indigenous futurism, because we're allowed to dig deep into the past in this kind of new way. And I look forward to sharing that with the world when it comes out. So
that's amazing. I can't wait to read that, because even when I was in Hawaii and learning about the origins, it just fascinated me because it sounded like a science fiction story, almost like an arc. Like I'm fascinated by the spaceship arc genre, and it felt like the boats that Native Hawaiians had to get to Hawaii were like full of everything, like the seeds and the domestic animals, even, and everything that you had, that you needed to come volunteer, to go to have
crazy people, right? Some crazy people going. Some people call it the original moonshot. They'll say it was the original moonshot. I just think that if you're crazy enough to do that and you believe in yourself and you're like, no, I really read the stars, I believe, I understand this at a scientific level that I can't even explain to you in English. That is profoundly powerful. And I mean, it's pretty cool to. Hey, did you get to see the Chief of War? It's like a 1790s. Yeah, I would love to get if you have had a chance, or you should watch it.
I just started. I can't. What's that called? Yeah, I love that. I just started it on Netflix.
I would love to get your take on that, because you have like the aperture, or one of the most unique lens to view that media, and that would be cool. It's special because they do speak a lot of Olelo Hawaii, so like having our language debut like that on Apple Plus is crazy.
Oh, it's on Apple. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Not to give them shameless promotion for those guys, but it is cool to see that. It's kind of like I got to see Black Panther, and that's one of my favorite, probably my most favorite Marvel movie ever. And the tension around like all of these different concepts and ideas. I mean, that's hard to beat.
It is. I love the way that you put voyaging journey, because I feel that that Black diaspora was also a voyaging journey.
It was
in enslavement, but from a different, vastly different way too, because it wasn't volunteered. It wasn't like we had to create our own agency in it. And I always like to say how it's like a science fiction horror story, because it's about the kidnapping of millions of Africans from West Africa, the homeland, or the home planet, and then going across a vast interstellar sea. And then when you arrive in the Americas, you could be, killed for speaking your native language, for practicing your religion. But in that voyaging journey, there was lots of agency. Like there's stories of women putting seeds in their hair along the way. People refusing to go on the journey and jumping into the ocean, right? Folks who, when they arrived, had to become hybrid futurist and create their own religion out of Christian hymnals that became spirituals, right? Spirituals that envisioned freedom. And so they had to create their own hybrid futurist language. And so that's, for me, when you said voyaging journey, I'm like, okay, I want to use that.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that's
You know who inspired a lot of my work, and it's actually interesting, and she's doing real well. She's at what just retired from Howard University. Fatima Jackson. She was my professor.
Oh
And she
wow.
spent time in Oakland and in Berkeley as well. And she, Dr. Professor Fatima Jackson, and she is a recipient of the Darwin Award and many other things. And when I was an undergrad, she was looking at this salt hypertension hypothesis as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, and it's grim. I mean, it's horrific stuff. But this was like recapitulating the voyage with mice, and it just totally
Wow.
clicked in my brain, like, oh, our diaspora shapes our genome, whether you like it or not. And I think that we're still uncovering
Yes.
what the impacts of those decisions are now today, and there will be future scientists that investigate these things with new tools that are hyper specific and high resolution that I think are going to allow us to improve medicines and strengthen our identity. And it's a form of repatriation, not repatriation,
Reparations.
reparations, excuse me, Lord. It is a form of reparations to dig into our own genomes and identify those things and create better therapies in the future. And our communities deserve that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea, right? Um, I think healing is the reparation that we're looking for, and how do we access that healing? Um, you know, I, I I kind of see it to make the future practical and
Mm,
accessible. I love games, and
yes.
that's why Ahmed and I and Eli Kosminski and we came up with our game AfroRhythms from the Future.
Mm,
Us as multiverse travelers in the future that can build a world. What does a world look like with more um, black superheroes and
yes.
black storytelling? And what once we build that world, what are the artifacts that we can create that make that world visible and manifest? And it's an imagination game. So I love that, and I feel like um, you know a roadblock to someone's future usually is that they're not able to access that muscle of imagination
Mm,
because
mm.
they're like because it's kind of literally beat out of us after kindergarten
Agreed.
in a
Agreed.
sense.
I think too. There's this thing. The one thing that I find inspiring about your work and having it take it's like it's one. And one of the people in the chat asked, what do you view as roadblocks for participating in designing in the future? And that's a whole multitude of things. But I think generally, what Professor Brooks is saying is that we don't encourage or help children learn how to forecast. Like, they do this innately, right? They have the largest imaginations you've ever seen, and then we stunt their growth with some I don't know, antiquated and draconian education system that rewards X, Y, and Z, so you can get into X, Y, and Z college, and that's neither here nor there. But even when we do encourage people to forecast the future, what you see a lot of the time is we, if I was to like divide it up, and this is probably not that helpful, but the majority of people are peddling out dystopian and apocalyptic futures. And I
Yeah.
want our listeners to understand how much harder it is to represent a utopian future where people are celebrated and people are doing well and thriving, and there's the other AI, the abundant intelligence, right? And so how do we get there, and how do we train people to do that? And it's extremely difficult. And so I wanted to talk to you about the Black Panther thing because it's been like weighing on me.
Yeah.
And in the first movie,
Yeah.
they contrast this by going into the boom, into the bubble. What is Wakanda? There's new types of architecture. There's the vibranium, which represents like abundance in itself, and it's like a resource, and it's this like commentary on stealing cobalt and this heart of darkness thing that was going on and still goes on and persists in places like the Congo. And the healing through the medicines and the medical advancements, and there's still like this element of mysticism, and even within that community there's diversity amongst these, like it's truly futuristic. And then I guess, so my question is like, and like I think Brian Coogler was pretty young to do that, and I wonder, you mean he probably didn't do it alone, but it's still very cool to like roll that out. Okay, so that happens, and I was left reeling when I left the movie. I was like buzzing. But the second movie, there were some pieces that were missing, namely the Black Panther himself. And then there was something that I thought was strange, and they had pitted Black people against Indigenous people.
Right.
And I wonder, like, is this a decision that was made because we know that you can't have sovereignty without freedom. You can't have freedom without, both of these things. Again, the one hand washes the other. And I'm wondering, like, do you think that was like a plot device, or do you think like I don't know, what is your take on that one?
I thought, it annoyed me at first. But I could see it as a plot device because, once you divide them, then you can reunite them. Right.
Exactly.
I mean, I loved the Indigenous, the Indigenous dream of, or science fiction origin story of going into the water, having an underworld, underwater civilization, through the Mayan civilization. Beautiful. Beautiful. And I think, you need to, it seemed like a plot device. I mean, I wanted to see, what can we do to understand that we're part of what you said. How do we create more utopian Star Trek universes that work, but they don't. It doesn't mean they don't have challenges. So that's the thing. I think how do we create challenges that don't just play into stereotypes, and how do we have there's Black Mirror. How do we have Bright Mirror? Solar punk is like another genre that I like too, which is there are problems in this future, but they're not. People aren't killing each other. They're trying to resolve conflicts in dialogue, meaningful dialogue. So I think there's a way towards that. In fact, I mean, we're trying to do it at one level with the Community Futures School. It's an after-school program through the Museum of Children's Arts that teaches high school students how to think about the future with intention, look for signals of the future, things that look interesting and then can scale up to be something bigger. It could be like, you just see the random Waymo at first on the streets, and then all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of these automated cars. But what does that mean? Like, even if you had an automated car or technology, what does it allow you to do that heals people? And how do we go to that? I don't know, just like, how do we create more stories? Ahmed and I talk a lot about who's going to be the next Gene Roddenberry, who created the first Star Trek, that, can think more optimistically with hope, a strategy of hope, that's implementable, So that's what I'm thinking about too when you ask that question. What's your take?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I think it is much more, in my own work, it's much more challenging to approach a utopian future. You can't even, it's much more challenging to find sci-fi that's focused on that. Like you said, like the whole solar punk genre or things like that. I also think that the way we educate the next generation, it's like, okay, so sometimes in class, I'll play around with my, students, and I'll give them things to think about so I can help them forecast. And so some of it is about those three futures: apocalyptic, dystopian, utopian. Then I like to help them think like 1 generation, 10 generations, and 100 generations in the future.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Because, it's hard. If I asked you to tell me something in one generation, it's easy to sort of think about near futurism, but 100 generations is much, much harder. To your point about the Gene Roddenberry, like, where are these people at? And then there's the way that we're kind of, or society is indoctrinating children's thought. I think that, like, imprisoning people in a Cartesian grid and being like, hey, children, let's all play Minecraft. I think that's very dangerous. I just wanted to get your take on that, because
you know, I was you know, I was talking to friends, family, and colleagues about how, you know, we are kind of rooted in this, what you said, you know, like fear, consumerism, and competition, and 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 we're kind of fed that data as feedback loops through our social media, you know. But how do we feed AI with data that emerges with the values we want to live by, like kinship, relationship, reciprocity, care, stewardship, and I feel like Indigenous communities, Black diaspora communities can really have a role in that, right? We can say, because that's another thing too, is that we have lived through apocalypse.
Yes.
We know, we have been in the end of times already. So how do we go from the end of times to to flourishing times, to where ancestral intelligence, where indigenous knowledge and wisdom buoy us up? You know, they give us a door in, a portal to the future. You know, it's continuity that, like you said, nourishes those next 10 generations.
Yes.
We
just need a little daylight, because I don't know. I'm, not just to speak. I totally agree with you. It's like the atrocities of the past. It's relative, and what concerns people, may not have the same impact or garner the same type of fear amongst our communities today. I couldn't agree with you more about that. That's so true. I was thinking about something else. Someone that's particularly inspiring is Sophia Noble, who is wrote and she said once, when she's thinking about the future and these deep theoretical questions, she finds inspiration in the banal, like the Dewey Decimal System or a Google search. And I was just wondering, like, what are the banal and boring things that, like, allow you to critically dissect things, or like, have you thought about that?
The boring thing. Well, I mean, I like looking at the design of future artifacts. That's kind of like, I like design. I work with the design school at Stanford, so like I'm really influenced by that. Banal things. Well, I like swimming. Swimming to me, like water. I love being surrounded by water. And for me, water is that nourishing force, right? And just going, back and forth in the lane. It's like a meditation. It's a body meditation. So for me, that's like a banal thing, but it buoys my spirit, hope. It feeds me. So that's something. I really like that question, though. What you were saying.
I mean, I find the same type of inspiration from surfing. It's like, there's no possible way for me to be addicted to data right now. I'm in nature. I'm doing the same thing that my ancestors did for thousands of years, and I'm experiencing the ebb and flow of the Moana, the ocean, and it's been doing this since, the Precambrian, and that's that. And it does help you center yourself. I think, for our listeners, I think that we do banal things every day that help us think, like going for walks or whatever that is, but people need to dedicate more time to that.
Yeah, I love that. I love walking. I think walking just makes me think of 10 ideas at once, and or more. So I feel that we can learn a lot from our ancestral intelligence, from like also you mentioned Sophia Noble,
Yes.
and she talks about algorithms of oppression.
That's
So we have the saying for the AfroRithm Futures Group: how do we go from Afro algorithms of oppression to Afro rhythms of liberation? You take Afro, you take rhythm from algorithm, you put them together to create that Afro rhythm.
yes.
And for me, what you're doing in surfing, what I'm doing in swimming is like we're exercising our Afro rhythms.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. It's definitely, I was thinking about that too when I saw a quote, or I ran into something about this, the just the idea of rhythms, and it makes me think of some early things I learned about like the assemblages of like quilts, not to bring it back to transatlantic slave trade, but how all of these algorithms were embedded in quilts. And I was
Yes.
like, oh, this is the most
Yes.
heavy thing I have ever heard. This is so cool. It's like literal embedding resistance into the technologies that you're creating.
Yes.
Everyone around you has no idea. They think they're so smart, oppressing you, and they have so I just thought it was the coolest thing.
Right. Ah, God, that's amazing. I love that. That's why I'm so fascinated by fractal textiles, because it's like a recursive loop. There's a whole story about that. I'm gonna talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah. But it's cool. It's just like it's like particularly inspiring.
Yeah,
So
I love how you put that embedded intelligence in the quilt. In our fabrics, in our ceremonies, and that's another thing. I feel like ceremony is so important too. Like, how do we have ceremony around our data? Acknowledge where it's from, honor it. Give it strength. It's like make sure that it's not extractive, that it's giving back. Like, I love that what you said about the Indigenous Futures Institute at UC San Diego.
yeah.
Like 4% of the revenue goes back to natives, right?
Yeah. I think that's a really important. I couldn't agree with you more about protocol around data, and that is both ancient and futuristic. It's like I mean, we all know that data is this probably the most valuable commodity on planet Earth. You can't just go and extract it from people without, recognizing its value, especially not in 2025. And so we are in desperate need of more protocol around that type of information. So I guess I have one more question before we kind of wrap it up. We got to keep it kind of quick, but I think one thing that we'll leave with is I kind of view that there are like certain pressures that result in innovation. It's like a storm cell. And you could view the civil rights movement as a storm cell. You could view what happened in the 1970s and the resulting Hawaiian Renaissance as a storm cell. And I'm wondering, like, do you think we're experiencing a storm cell? And how would you encourage people in this moment to think about the future? And then we'll leave with that.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to think about the future as a portal to creativity, because there's like 500 or more seeds of innovation going on at once, especially in the face of any oppression, backlash that we're creating, even under siege. And I think that's really important to understand, and that these seeds can take root and flourish. And so it's always like looking for the open space. Look for the open space in the future. And that's shaped by ancestral intelligence and shaped, by native and Afrofuturist looks and queer futurism too. So
beautifully said, folks. Please do look for the open space, of course. Okay, so I just wanted to say, first and foremost, thank you so much, Professor Brooks. This has been so insightful. That is all for today, folks. And thank you to everyone who has joined and participated and thought about creating stickers. And I should also remind you that you should come back for tomorrow with another candid conversation. And we will be thinking about forecasting and imagining the future, and you will be joined by Professor Brooks. So thank you guys so much, and have a lovely day, and hopefully see you tomorrow.
Thanks so much, Keolu.
Thank
So
you.
great to talk to you.